wonderful world of Disney. In primitive societies the world over, tales of the past are often preserved in drama and song, in performance and pantomime, acted out for all to share and see. For the Eskimo, there is no such thing as a written language, so the art of the dramatist and the storyteller is much admired. Here, history is only as real as the speaking voice, and the past lives mostly in talk, in anecdote and remembered lore. Even the children love to entertain themselves in this way, and such a tale is being told now. Like most sagas, this one came from the past. People had forgotten how long ago it happened, enough that it was once upon a time. It came to be known as the legend of the brave fawns. It's a favorite among Eskimo youngsters because it's about children. Two children, as it turned out, who had to be very resourceful and very, very brave. Their names were Lolly and Joseph. Not Eskimo names at all, but easy to remember names given them at the mission school. But Joseph and Lolly were Eskimo through and through. And it was their native intelligence and self-reliance that were to be put to the test. Their adventure began quietly enough as a routine hunting expedition along the Arctic coast. Their father was Ningeok, said to be the best hunter in the village. And if young Joseph wanted to be anything, it was a hunter. Hopefully one as famous as his father. In Joseph's eyes, men like his father, his grandfather, and his uncle were the true heroes. It was generally their hunting feats that were turned into the tribal legends, and he wanted in the worst way to be like them. Small and untried as he was, he had no way of knowing he might one day become a legend himself. A hunter of long experience, Ningeok knew the sound for what it was, and soon his spyglass confirmed his expectations. There they were at last, the walrus, moving north on their summer migration. There was the meat for the coming winter. There were the tough hides for boats. There was the ivory to carve into harpoons, knife handles, household utensils, and even trinkets. There it all lay, Ningeok's harvest, his treasure, and his livelihood. His for the taking. Things first. He knew the walrus were not about to vanish, so he put in for shore. This was familiar ground for Ningeok. Ever since his boyhood, he had been coming to this particular river. Every summer, he and his people would travel the 200 miles from their home village to set up a temporary camp on this sandbar. It was important to be here, ready and waiting when the walrus came. Summer camp was a familiar chore, and the family went about it without need of directions or even conversation. From long practice and old habit, each knew his or her task. For her part, Lolly had known from the beginning that she would be the watcher of the fire. Since her mother had died 2 winters before, it was taken for granted she would fill a mother's role as fire tender, camp cook, and caretaker, and guardian of her small brother. She definitely would not be going on the hunting expedition. But little Joseph had other ideas and secret hopes. Being Eskimo, hunting was in his blood. Come the day when he could claim his own gun and carry it with him wherever he went, that would be the high point of all his boyish hopes. He almost wished his sister had not come. Then maybe the men would take him with them. But Ningeok knew better. Walrus were not for children. Hunting them was hard, exhausting work, and sometimes terribly dangerous. And so it was settled. Joseph must stay behind. A boy's dream could not change the facts of life. Ningeok was eager to be off. He would not wait longer, even for a meal. A cup of tea, perhaps, but no more. He promised to be back in 24 hours at the most. Maybe even in 10 or 12, given good hunting. He put Lolly in charge and asked Joseph to mind his sister, and his parting words were, "Keep the fire ready. For supper, we'll all have walrus meat." So Ningeok and his companions pushed off. There was work to do out on the ice pack. Walrus hunting was the high point of their year. They were eager to get at it. Little Joseph could feel the hunter's excitement, the quickening of the blood, the promise of danger. And he seemed unwilling, even now, to let the boat go without him. There was no holding them back now. The hunters were off to sea, off to adventure and risk, pitting themselves against the unknown dangers of the Arctic deep. Meanwhile, he, not yet a man, must stay behind and do woman's work. It was bitter gall for a small boy with big dreams. the children had a net in the river and were starting the annual harvest of Arctic salmon. Here was a task they could easily handle while the men were away. It was as vital that they take a good harvest of these valuable fish as it was that their father take a good catch of walrus. One of the reasons for the camp being here was this yearly salmon run, but it would be a brief event lasting only a few days, and so it was necessary to take the catch while the chance offered. In this land of potential starvation, all food sources counted, and none could be safely ignored or overlooked. In winter, the Arctic is its own icebox, and refrigeration comes automatically with the weather. In the time of bitter cold, a fish will freeze stiff in seconds. But in summer, a salmon that must last is best stockpiled after a session in the sun. And long ago, ever since she could hold a knife, Lolly had been taught the art of preparing the catch for drying. When it comes to household chores, a small boy's enthusiasm will last just so long. Then he's apt to go off looking for activity that's more fun. Joseph had managed to catch a lemming, that strange Arctic animal no bigger than a mouse. It was unusual to come upon a lone lemming. Generally, they traveled in swarming colonies. This little fellow, it appeared, was either lost or an orphan. Well, in Joseph, he'd found a friend who meant to keep him as a pet. Little did the boy realize that this simple act would have strange consequences. Lolly, meanwhile, put up the last of her fish, and then let her thoughts turn to other matters. Somewhere on that distant horizon, she half hoped she might catch sight of the hunters. It had been many hours since they left, but as yet there was no sign. But then Eskimo time is unlike any other time. During the tundra summer, there's no day and night. Only one long, continuing period of sunlight. And sometimes a normal day can seem unending. While the children slept, more precious hours slipped by, like the current in the nearby river. But the tundra itself never sleeps, and only rarely the animals upon it. The Arctic wolf, for one, rests only when gorged. When hungry, he hunts for whatever he can find. Strangely enough, the main predator in these parts is not the wolf. It is starvation, a ruthless specter that cuts down man and animal alike. It is ever present, and all creatures must learn to live in its shadow. The wolf knows its sharp edge as well as any, and so a windfall such as this must be devoured as quickly as possible. This ravenous kind of hunger is what is meant by the expression, wolfing it down. At this moment that Joseph's lemming chose to make a noise. A fatal and final false move.
Joseph, wake up! The men are back! Father's here! Joseph! It's Papa!
Who did?
A wolf.
A wolf! Why, gonna shoot him!
In your sleep?
Where's my linen?
You should know where it is. The wolf got it. Come on and help me get more fish.
Suddenly things seem to be going all wrong. First a robber wolf, and now some even bolder thieves.
Lolly, look!
Lolly knew that seals favored a fish diet, but she hadn't expected them to destroy her nets. This was serious. Without a net, no fish. Without fish, no winter food supply. But Eskimos are not ones to cry over spilt milk or stolen fish. Stoically, Lolly went about the business of taking inventory. First, a calculating of their needs and their chances. If only she knew how long they must hold out. Their food wouldn't last for many more meals, but then Ningeok had never intended to be gone so long. She came to a decision. Until he returned, they must make the tundra itself support them. Not an easy task for two youngsters without gun or guidance to help them. Eking out a living here is touch and go at best for bird, animal, or human. In this bleak scene, there is little that is edible. Still, tribal experience had taught Lolly's people how to look for things that might escape the untrained eye. And so she and Joseph set out, prepared to fall back on ancient lore and knowledge. The wisdom of the race would be their only hope now. It was no easy matter finding something to eat in this bleak emptiness. It was a challenge, calling for a sharp eye, and sometimes a sharp ear. Ah, well, live and let live. Some things are more for pleasure than eating. What Lolly really hoped to find was a nest with eggs in it. She'd been too late with the baby snipes earlier. Eggs she might have taken, but not the young birds. She knew it was late for eggs, but she kept hoping. Ah, a hawk. With a nest somewhere? She would watch where it went. Yes, a hawk with a nest. And some ferocious-looking occupants. To say nothing of a guardian hovering very, very near. The hawk is a predatory bird. It must kill to live. It hadn't occurred to Lolly that she might have to do the same. Not yet, anyway. For all her maturity, Lolly was as much a child at heart as her small brother, and she too could enjoy the tundra for its lighter moments. Such things as the little bird that went around turning over rocks for its dinner, called a turnstone. What else? She and Joseph should have a beak so long, and a job so easy. A nesting ground. Now their harvest might really bring in something. Eggs in abundance, by the dozens, by the hundreds, theirs for the taking. Here was sustenance and supply that seemed bounty without end. In this treeless terrain where all nesting of necessity was on the ground, the gathering of eggs was a relatively simple matter. And the birds, in their confusion, were quite defenseless against marauders. Once in a while, though, a victim would decide to put up a battle, and then the game got more exciting. Much to their chagrin, the young robbers discovered their fun had backfired. Their precious cargo had been badly damaged. Maybe they weren't as smart as they thought. After all, when you put all your eggs in one basket, you can't very well roll around on the ground and not come up with a broken shell or two. In fact, you may discover you've unintentionally made yourself an omelet. In nature's scheme, there is little that goes to waste, especially in the food department. What doesn't suit one will almost certainly suit another. And so it turned out that some wolf pups enjoyed an unexpected feast. When the young wolves chose to tag along behind, the children were quick to accept their company, forgetting for the moment that wolves generally meant trouble. For their part, the pups sensed there might be another hand out here somewhere, and their growls took on a kind of mock ferociousness. But Lolly might well have obeyed her first instincts.
Run, Joseph! Run!
Then a strange thing happened. Their bodies seemed paralyzed by fear, their feet chained to the ground, their arms heavy as lead. The terror of the nightmare was upon them, and they ran as though fleeing a monster in a dream. Break this old shack. It was just barely wolf-proof, but at least it was protection of a sort. In the confusion and excitement, a development would occur that would put a whole new complexion on the situation. It started with the greediness of the pups, and with one especially. This little fellow had had a taste of fine raw eggs. He was sure there were more around here somewhere. And what with a little searching and following his nose, he was clever enough to find them. But soon his mother smelled him out. He was inside, she was outside, and this just wouldn't do. Suddenly, she knew the frustration of not being able to reach him. and this brought on a natural reaction of animal anger. Now she had to get to her offspring. No two ways about it. It was Joseph who finally sized up the situation. When in a trap, toss out the bait. A simple answer that seemed to satisfy all. And so it turned out that all the wolves had really wanted was to put their family back together. Enough of adventure for one day. It was time to be getting back to camp. Hopefully the men would be there by now. The silent camp came as a heavy disappointment to the children. There was something disquieting about the scene. Something not right. They had thought by now they would find a kettle singing on the fire, the sound of excited voices recalling the hunt, the smell of meat cooking. Instead, emptiness, an ominous emptiness that filled Lolly's heart with foreboding. Where were the men? What could have happened? Everything depended on their safe return. How long since they had left? 12 hours, 24? Lolly had no way of knowing exactly. She carried no watch. Only a sense of time in her head and in her heart. Now a kind of fear began to gnaw on her nerves. What if the men didn't come back at all? It was a question she knew she shouldn't ask, especially in front of Joseph. For his sake, in fact, she must keep up a good front and seem optimistic and pin her hopes on, well, on hope itself. Some hours later, the mood changed, shattered by a small boy's excitement. Lolly had long since learned to take her brother's emergencies with a grain of salt and a smile. For a crisis with Joseph was apt to lie about halfway between disaster and laughter. Whatever the problem, it seemed to involve a short Eskimo and a long rope. To what purpose? Who could say? So this was Joseph's discovery, a caribou fawn. Bogged down in the mud, weak and near exhaustion, the tiny animal was about at the end of its rope. as luck would have it, he was at the end of Joseph's rope, and help was at hand. All of a sudden, Joseph found he had about all he could handle. Well, if he could just get this little maverick steered in the general direction of the camp, that would help. Beyond that, he'd just have to hang on. Hang on he did, all the way home. The running tug-of-war was about over. Honors even. Now, Joseph's first order of business was a general cleanup. Not his own so much as the fawn's. He decided he must get the mud off. His fawn, it seemed, needed a bath. And right now. The little animal had suddenly become his fawn, his personal prize. And he felt sure Lolly would enjoy it too, once she could see how pretty a fawn could be. A really clean one. As for the fawn himself, it was a good question whether he needed or wanted more icy water on his back. But the matter wasn't for him to decide. And so, an improvised bath of sorts was had. Lolly, meanwhile, had been having other thoughts. In the harsh cold of the Arctic, a caribou meant meat and survival. This animal, so fortuitously delivered into their hands, just might mean the difference between living and dying. Their only wise move was to kill it. This seemed a cruel thing even to consider, yet the Eskimo way is to face the hard facts of existence. And Lolly, all her life, had been trained in the Eskimo way. But next thing she knew, Joseph was preparing to feed the little newcomer. He got out a can of condensed milk, the last but one, and asked her to punch holes in it with her knife. Lolly debated what to do. Feeding the fawn would almost compound the cruelty of later killing it. Besides, they needed the milk for themselves. Yet Joseph's joy in his newfound companion was so great, she hadn't the heart to disappoint him. Lolly missed her father more than ever and wished he would return. He would know what to do when she seemed not to. As the hunter of the family, he could have dispatched the fawn without a qualm, and neither she nor Joseph would have questioned the necessity. But now that she must face the decision on her own, it all seemed different and somehow wrong. She decided she would postpone the final act. First, she would get some rest. Perhaps after a good sleep, the problem would seem simpler, and her mind would be clearer and less confused. Suddenly, as though materialized out of nowhere, a caribou doe came on the scene. She went unerringly to her fawn, a mother's instinct, her guide. Sounds carry far on the open tundra, especially to those whose sharp ears can interpret their meaning. Of survival are indeed strange. Now Lolly realized she wouldn't have to kill the fawn. The wolf had solved her dilemma for her. Here was the food that could save them. If only the men would come home. Never a day passed but what Lolly didn't know that fervent wish. It was her daily prayer, her silent longing, forever close to her secret heart. The Eskimo eye is a trained eye, quick to notice the unusual. And one day, Lolly caught sight of something that roused her curiosity. As she came closer, she saw what the strange debris was, the wreckage of a boat. More than that, it was an Eskimo boat, the remains of an umiak, closely resembling her father's. She knew a sudden sense of fear and premonition.
Papa's gas can.
What could have happened? There was no way of knowing. The men obviously had met with mishap, and from the evidence, Lolly could only conclude they were lost. Tragedy such as this stalked the path of nearly every family in Lolly's village, so she was not entirely unprepared for it. Life for her and her people was never without hazard, and nothing was ever guaranteed to be safe and secure. But for all that, it was different when the pain was personal. She returned to camp with a heavy heart, and now Even little Joseph sensed their peril. What were they to do? Two small, brave fawns, themselves deserted and left on the tundra, every bit as orphaned as the caribou calf they had befriended.